Welcome to Easy English Talks podcast.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to English Podcast. If you've ever reached that strange point in your English journey where you understand almost everything on paper, but conversation still feels slightly stiff or overly calculated, then this deep dive is for you. It's a moment many advanced learners recognize. You know the structures, you know the vocabulary. You can write emails that sound perfectly polished, but when you're actually in a real conversation, something feels a bit mechanical, like the gears are turning, but the movement isn't fully smooth yet. Today, we are going to work on the exact skills that help you cross that invisible border between being highly proficient and being truly fluent in a natural, flexible, emotionally intelligent way. That shift often requires more than learning hard words. It's about mastering the kind of language real people use to express subtle feelings, build rapport, handle complexity, and navigate moments where the stakes are genuinely high. And to do that, we're going to analyze real-world conversations built around actual human situations, not textbook examples. Not scripted dialogues made to sound clean and simple. We're talking about the kinds of interactions where people try to make sense of their stress, their relationships, their decisions, and their misunderstandings. Because that's the reality of C to communication. Using language to think out loud, to regulate emotions, to negotiate meaning, and to build connection. The nature of advanced learning. Before we dive into the dialogues, let's ground ourselves in something practical. Language learning at the C2 level is not a straight climb. It's more like a long-distance trail with sudden turns, unexpected drops and stretches where you might feel like nothing is happening. Some days your progress feels explosive, almost electric, and on other days, you might feel stuck, foggy, or overwhelmed by the details. That fluctuation is normal. It's part of the process. Your goal isn't perfection, it's integration. How do you combine vocabulary, structure, tone, emotional awareness, and storytelling into something that feels real and effortless? That's what we're building today. Building a vocabulary foundation. 3 key words to start. We'll examine 3 advanced words that show up in everyday English far more often than you might expect, especially when people talk about chaotic schedules, unexpected opportunities, and the feeling of being completely overloaded. These words help express ideas with precision and texture, and when used correctly, they instantly elevate the clarity of your speech. The first word is frantic. It sits somewhere between busy and panicked, but it carries a distinct emotional edge. When native speakers say a day was frantic, they mean it was fast-paced to the point of discomfort, where tasks overlap and their brain feels stretched thin. It's not total chaos, but it's close enough that you feel like you're barely keeping things together. You've probably heard people say something like, "The morning was completely frantic. I didn't even have time to breathe." That's not just being busy. It's being mentally pulled in several directions at once. This word helps you describe intensity in a way that feels vivid but relatable. It's a common choice in workplaces, parenting, travel, or any situation where life speeds up beyond what feels manageable. The second word we're exploring is serendipity, which describes a fortunate discovery or positive moment that happens unexpectedly. It's the kind of experience people talk about when they say, "I wasn't looking for this, but it found me anyway." It's used often in professional conversations, creative settings, relationships, and everyday storytelling. For example, someone might say, "I met my business partner through pure serendipity. We happened to sit next to each other on a delayed flight. The moment itself wasn't planned, but it led to something meaningful." That's what gives the word its elegance and emotional weight. And the third word is overwhelmed. This one is incredibly common, far more than inundated. which is more formal. Overwhelmed is what people actually say when they feel buried by tasks, emotions, or responsibilities. You'll hear things like, "I've been overwhelmed at work lately," or "I feel overwhelmed by everything happening this week." It's conversational, relatable, and it gives the listener an immediate understanding of your emotional state. Being able to express degrees of stress like this is a key part of C2 communication because it helps you articulate your internal experience with accuracy rather than hiding behind vague phrases. Real conversation analysis. Natalie and Chris, now that we've built this small vocabulary foundation, let's transition into our first real conversation. This one revolves around two friends, Natalie and Chris, who meet up after a demanding week. Their conversation showcases how advanced speakers use descriptive language, emotional nuance, and reflective thinking to turn a simple update into something much deeper. Picture the scene. They sit down at a small cafe near their offices. Natalie looks exhausted, not in a dramatic way, but in that quiet, heavy way that comes from a week where every day felt like a sprint. When Chris asks how she's been, she laughs softly and says her entire week has been frantic, not just busy, but full of constant pressure and shifting deadlines. She explains that she was overwhelmed by messages, requests, unexpected meetings, and last-minute changes. It wasn't just the amount of work. It was the mental strain of trying to keep up. Chris listens, not just waiting to speak, but genuinely listening, and he uses quick, supportive responses, the kind of small but meaningful verbal signals advanced speakers rely on. Things like "that sounds intense" or "wow, I can imagine how draining that must have been." These small responses are essential tools in natural C2 conversations. They guide the speaker forward, create emotional safety, and show you're not just hearing the words but the person behind them. As the conversation unfolds, Natalie shares something unexpected that happened during her stressful week. And here's where our second vocabulary word comes into play. She explains that on Thursday, she left her office late, feeling completely burned out. She stopped by a local bookstore just to clear her head. While wandering around, she picked up a novel she hadn't seen in years, a book she'd been searching for since college. And there it was, sitting on the shelf, almost as if it were waiting for her. She describes the moment as pure serendipity. Chris laughs because he knows exactly what she means. It wasn't life-changing, but it was one of those small, uplifting moments that feel almost magical because they arrive when you need them most. This small story prompts a deeper shift in the conversation. They begin reflecting on how unpredictable life can be, how a week that feels overwhelming and frantic can still hold pockets of beauty, comfort, or unexpected joy. And this is where advanced conversation naturally expands from describing events to extracting meaning from them. They talk about how sometimes the thing that keeps you going is a simple moment of serendipity, a reminder that not everything is pressure and deadlines. And Chris notes that moments like that often arrive when you're not actively looking for them, but when your mind is open enough to recognize them. This emotional reflection is the foundation of advanced fluency. It's not just vocabulary. It's the ability to move fluidly between experiences, emotions, insights, and small stories, all while keeping the conversation natural and grounded. Deepening the dialogue, emotional vocabulary, and reflection, and this is just the beginning. Chris then leans back in his chair, thinking for a moment before sharing something from his own week. He explains that he also had a series of overwhelming days, but the part that really got to him wasn't the workload itself. It was the feeling of constantly being on, constantly responding, constantly adjusting. He describes it as one of those weeks where your brain never truly rests, even when you finally get home, and he uses a phrase many native speakers rely on: I felt mentally stretched thin. It's a simple expression, yet it captures the exhaustion of trying to keep your thoughts organized when everything feels like it is happening at once. Natalie nods immediately because she understands that feeling too well. She says that when stress piles up, everything seems louder. Emails, messages, even small inconveniences. But what she finds interesting is that despite the frantic pace, moments of clarity can still appear unexpectedly. That's when she brings the conversation back to her bookstore experience, saying that the simple act of holding that book reminded her she still has parts of her life untouched by work, untouched by pressure, something that belongs entirely to her. Chris smiles and adds a phrase common among native speakers. Sometimes the universe throws you a small lifeline. Whether you believe in luck, timing, or just coincidence, these moments feel grounding. They give you something to hold on to. And this is where Natalie's energy shifts. Her posture relaxes. She begins to reflect not just on the stressful week, but on the underlying reasons she felt so overwhelmed. She explains that the work itself wasn't the issue. It was the constant feeling that she had to keep up, to perform, to respond instantly. She says, "It's like I'm always in reaction mode instead of actually living intentionally." That phrase, living intentionally, is something you hear often among native speakers who are struggling to balance their priorities. It points to a desire for more control, more clarity, more purpose. Chris listens closely, offering gentle prompts like, "What do you think triggered that? And do you feel that often?" These short questions are crucial elements of C-to-level interaction. They guide the conversation deeper without dominating it. They show curiosity rather than judgment. Natalie considers the question. She explains that somewhere along the line, she stopped giving herself permission to slow down. She got so used to being productive that she forgot how to rest without guilt, and she realized that every time she felt overwhelmed, she blamed the workload instead of examining her habits. This reflection leads to the introduction of our next concept, the emotional layer of advanced communication. Being able to express not just what happened, but why it affected you the way it did. This requires vocabulary that is both simple and precise. Words like drained, guilty, relieved, grounded, disconnected, or consumed. These are the emotional building blocks real speakers use daily. Chris recognizes the shift and responds with something supportive but authentic. That makes total sense. When you're stuck in that cycle, it's hard to even notice you're in it. He doesn't offer solutions immediately. He doesn't minimize her experience. He stays present, which is one of the most powerful conversational skills at the C2 level. Then he shares his own moment of clarity from the week. He explains that on Wednesday, after a long string of meetings, he went out for a short walk just to breathe, and without planning it, he bumped into an old friend he hadn't seen in years. What started as a quick hello turned into a meaningful 20-minute conversation that shifted his whole mood. He calls it a small reset, a phrase native speakers use to describe those brief experiences that help you recalibrate mentally. Natalie laughs because she can picture exactly how that feels, the spark of connection, the unexpected comfort. She says, "It's amazing how something so random can completely change the tone of your day." And Chris agrees, adding, "Those spontaneous interactions remind you you're still human, not just a task machine." They pause for a moment, letting that idea settle. And this natural pause is important in advanced conversations. Silence isn't awkward. It's a sign of processing, of mutual understanding. It gives space for emotions to settle and new thoughts to rise. Then Natalie leans forward, her tone shifting with curiosity. She asks Chris whether these moments, his unexpected meeting, and her bookstore discovery might be telling them something about the pace they've both been living at. She wonders if the reason these moments feel so powerful is that they stand in contrast to everything else: the rush, the noise, the constant multitasking. Chris nods thoughtfully and says, maybe it's not the moments themselves. Maybe it's the reminder that we actually need space for things to happen. This idea resonates with both of them, and the conversation gently transitions from storytelling into reflection about life, priorities, and emotional well-being. This is a defining feature of advanced communication. A conversation begins with daily stress but gradually unfolds into something more introspective, meaningful, and relational. It's not forced. It's not academic. It's simply how real conversations evolve when people feel safe to share openly. Key takeaways from the first dialogue now before moving to the next scenario. This dialogue gives us several key takeaways that are worth highlighting for your own fluency. Vocabulary can create emotional clarity. Words like frantic, overwhelmed, drained, or grounded help express your inner experience accurately. Supportive listening shapes the flow. Phrases like, I hear you, that sounds tough, or I can see why you felt that way, turn a conversation into connection. Small moments can reveal larger truths. Using everyday experiences as entry points into deeper topics is something native speakers do constantly. Reflection is a sign of advanced fluency. Being able to step back and analyze why something affected you shows mastery beyond grammar. Scenario 2. Navigating sensitive relational issues. And now that we've explored stress, pace, and emotional awareness, it is time to shift into another crucial area of C to communication, handling delicate relational moments where honesty and respect intersect. As their conversation winds down, Natalie and Chris finish their coffees and the scene shifts. We now move into a new real-world situation, one that tests emotional intelligence, boundaries, and honest communication. This scenario centers around two friends, Mia and Jordan, navigating a sensitive issue about expectations, financial pressure, and the fear of disappointing someone you care about. It begins on a quiet Saturday morning. Mia has invited Jordan over to talk because she sensed that something had been off between them during the past 2 weeks. They didn't argue. There was no dramatic moment, but the rhythm of their friendship felt slightly disrupted. Less ease, fewer messages, more hesitation. And instead of ignoring it, Mia decides to address it directly, which is a common behavior among emotionally mature native speakers. Avoidance creates distance. Conversation restores connection. When Jordan arrives, Mia starts in a gentle, low-pressure way. She says, "Hey, before we dive into anything else, I've been picking up on a bit of tension lately. I could be wrong, but I just want to check in." This phrasing is important. She doesn't accuse. She doesn't assume. She simply expresses her observation and leaves space for Jordan's perspective. This kind of wording is extremely common in high-level English communication because it respects the other person's autonomy while also being transparent. Jordan takes a deep breath. He hesitates for a moment, not because he doesn't trust Mia, but because he's been wrestling with something quietly. Finally, he admits that he's been feeling uneasy about an upcoming group celebration. Mia is planning a dinner for her promotion, and she chose a trendy restaurant that's known for being pricey. She was excited. Everyone else seemed excited, but Jordan wasn't. And this is where he uses a phrase that carries emotional nuance. "I've been reluctant to say anything." The word reluctant expresses internal resistance. Not a hard no, not anger, but discomfort rooted in fear, uncertainty, or vulnerability. Jordan explains that he recently started dealing with unexpected financial strain after a cut in his working hours, something he hasn't shared with anyone yet. Because of that, the idea of a high-cost dinner made him anxious. What matters here is not just the content, but the tone. Jordan isn't dramatic. He isn't complaining. He's simply being honest about his circumstances. And that honesty is a key element of advanced communication. He says, I didn't want to be the one who ruined the plan. I didn't want to make things awkward. But the truth is, I can't afford something like that right now. And I've been stressing about how to tell you. This admission immediately softens the atmosphere. Mia's facial expression shifts not to frustration, but understanding. She says, Thank you for telling me. I could sense something was weighing on you, but I didn't know what it was. Notice how she validates his feelings before addressing the situation itself. Validation builds trust, and it signals that the relationship matters more than the event. She continues, honestly, I think I've been missing the subtle signs. You've been quieter lately and we haven't hung out as much. I should have checked in sooner. Here she uses the word subtle to describe small behavioral cues, tiny shifts in tone, timing, or emotion that often carry hidden meaning. Native speakers rely heavily on this vocabulary when discussing emotional awareness. Jordan looks relieved. He explains that he never intended to hide anything. He simply felt embarrassed. And embarrassment is a powerful emotion that often leads people to retreat instead of communicating. He says, I know it's not a huge deal in the grand scheme of things, but I really didn't want to disappoint you. Mia shakes her head gently. You're not disappointing me. If anything, it means a lot that you trust me enough to tell me how you're actually feeling. Her tone is warm but firm, embodying something essential, assertiveness combined with compassion. In English-speaking cultures, being assertive doesn't mean being loud or demanding. It means being clear, honest, and respectful, and Mia models that perfectly here. She then admits something unexpected. She wasn't fully comfortable with the original plan either. She chose the expensive restaurant because she thought that's what people expected for a celebration, not because she genuinely wanted it. In her words, I felt like I was supposed to make it fancy, even though a smaller, more relaxed evening sounds way more like me. This revelation surprises Jordan. It also shifts the dynamic entirely. Suddenly, the issue isn't just Jordan's financial stress. It's a shared misunderstanding. Both of them hiding their true preferences because they assumed the other wanted something else. This happens constantly in real friendships and relationships. Two people acting based on imagined expectations instead of honest communication. Jordan laughs quietly, shaking his head. So we were both uncomfortable and neither of us said anything. And Mia replies, pretty much. That's what happens when we try to be polite instead of honest. This mutual admission transforms the tone of the conversation. What started as tension becomes connection. Mia suggests an alternative, a small dinner at her apartment with home-cooked food. Something warm, affordable, and personal. Jordan smiles immediately. That sounds perfect, he says, genuinely relieved. This shift demonstrates one of the most important communication skills at the C2 level, the ability to pivot, to recognize when a plan no longer serves the people involved and change direction with care and respect. But the conversation isn't over yet. Jordan uses this moment of honesty to share something deeper. He says, I think I've been avoiding talking about money because it makes me feel less capable, less put together. Mia responds, we all go through tough seasons. It doesn't define you, and it doesn't make you any less of a friend. This right here is advanced fluency, not just linguistically, but emotionally. Being able to articulate shame or fear, and being able to respond with empathy shows maturity in communication that no vocabulary list alone can teach. As the conversation wraps up, Jordan expresses gratitude, not with grand speeches, but with a simple, authentic line native speakers often use. I really appreciate you listening. It means more than you know. Mia smiles and says, always. That's what friends are for. Next time, let's just promise to be a little more upfront with each other. They laugh and the tension dissolves completely. Lessons from the second scenario. This scenario teaches several powerful lessons for your own English fluency. Reluctance is often rooted in vulnerability. Being able to express that gently builds deeper connection. Assertiveness is kindness with clarity. It creates safety and prevents misunderstandings. Subtle cues matter. Catching small shifts in behavior is part of advanced communication. Honesty removes unnecessary pressure. Most conflicts fade quickly when both sides share the truth. Scenario 3. Professional miscommunication and repair. In the next part, we'll move from personal conversations to a professional setting where misunderstandings, miscommunication, and assumptions can damage working relationships if not handled skillfully. If personal conversations require emotional honesty, workplace conversations demand precision, tact, and strategic language. Even small misunderstandings can create tension, especially when deadlines, responsibilities, or expectations collide. Our next scenario shows how colleagues, Daniel and Sophie, navigate a professional misunderstanding using advanced conversational tools, clarifying intent, maintaining respect, and repairing trust. It starts on a Wednesday afternoon. Sophie has noticed that Daniel has been unusually distant since their last team meeting. He's polite, but something in his tone feels clipped. He responds quickly, but never expands. His usual warmth is gone, and because they typically work well together, this sudden shift catches her attention. Sophie knows how dangerous unspoken tension can be in a collaborative environment. So before the workday ends, she walks over to Daniel's desk and asks if they can talk briefly. She chooses her words carefully. I might be reading this wrong, but I've sensed a bit of strain between us since Monday. If something I said or didn't sit well with you, I'd like to understand. Notice the phrasing, gentle, open, without blame. This mirrors how emotionally intelligent professionals approach conflict. Daniel pauses, then nods. They step into a quiet corner of the office. His expression softens slightly as if he's relieved the conversation is finally happening. He begins slowly. Thanks for bringing it up. I didn't want to make things awkward, but yeah, something has been bothering me. He explains that during Monday's meeting, Sophie presented their project update to the department head. Normally, they co-present or at least review the slides together beforehand, but this time she finalized the presentation on her own because Daniel had been out sick the previous day. When he watched her deliver it, he noticed she shared a set of data he hadn't approved yet, figures he had flagged as preliminary, not ready for upper management. He describes his reaction clearly but calmly. I felt sidelined, he says, and honestly, I was worried the numbers would be misconstrued as our final analysis. The phrase misconstrued is crucial here. Instead of saying you made it look like something it wasn't or you misrepresented the work, he frames the potential problem as an issue of interpretation again, not blame. This keeps the conversation neutral and focused on process rather than personal fault. Sophie listens carefully. She doesn't interrupt. Her expression shifts from concern to understanding. Once Daniel finishes, she takes a breath and says, "Thank you for telling me. I can absolutely see how that would make you feel left out." She begins by validating his emotional experience, not defending herself. This is an essential step in resolving professional tension. Then she explains her side with equal clarity. She tells him that when she realized they needed updated numbers for the meeting, she panicked slightly. She checked the project folder and saw the data set he had been working on. She noticed the preliminary label but misinterpreted it as meaning minor adjustments needed, not ready to share. She says, "I should have double-checked with you. I thought I was helping by keeping the project moving forward." What's powerful here is the absence of excuses. She doesn't say, "Well, you were sick," or "no one else could do it." Instead, she owns the oversight. She continues, "It was a genuine misunderstanding on my part, not an attempt to bypass you." Daniel nods slowly. His posture relaxes, his tone softens. "I didn't think you were trying to go around me. I was more worried that the director would think the numbers were final." That honest clarification removes lingering tension. It shows that his frustration wasn't rooted in distrust of Sophie, but in fear of professional miscommunication. Now that both sides understand the context, the conversation naturally moves toward problem solving, which is the hallmark of advanced workplace communication. Sophie asks, "How can we prevent this kind of mix-up in the future?" Her tone is constructive, not defensive, not passive-assertive in the healthiest sense, clear, collaborative, and focused on solutions. Daniel thinks for a moment. Then he suggests something realistic. Maybe anytime one of us can't review something, we leave a short note in the folder explaining what's final and what still needs work. Just a sentence or two to avoid confusion. Sophie agrees instantly. That's simple, and it makes sure we're always on the same page. But then she adds something even more meaningful. "I also want you to know our partnership matters to me. If anything I did made you question that, I want to rebuild that trust." This statement is important for two reasons. First, it acknowledges the emotional component professionals often ignore. Second, it reaffirms commitment to the relationship, not just the project. Daniel responds with equal sincerity. "I appreciate that. I value working with you too. And I'm glad we talked about this instead of letting it sit." With the tension gone, their communication becomes smoother, clearer, more authentic, and this moment becomes a turning point, strengthening rather than damaging their collaboration. Key strategies for professional resolution. There are several lessons here that advanced learners can integrate immediately. Clear observation beats accusation. "I sense strain" is better than "you've been acting weird." Intent matters. Misconstrued helps focus on interpretation, not blame. Validation is essential. "I can see why that bothered you" opens the door to resolution. Responsibility can be shared without guilt. Mutual understanding prevents defensiveness. Assertiveness is collaborative. Asking "how can we prevent this" transforms the dynamic. Repair is as important as explanation. Reaffirming trust ensures long-term teamwork. Scenario 4. Internal conflict and major life decisions. Now that we've explored professional resolution, the next part of this deep dive will take us into a different kind of advanced communication, confronting internal conflict, identity, purpose, and the emotional weight of major decisions. These conversations demand not just vocabulary, but clarity of thought, vulnerability, and careful phrasing. Our next scenario shifts from the external world of deadlines and workplace misunderstandings to something more internal, personal, and emotionally layered. It's about the kind of conversation people have when they are facing a major life decision, a pivot point where logic, ambition, fear, and identity collide. These conversations are some of the hardest to navigate, even for native speakers, because they require clarity without rigidity and honesty without emotional overload. This scenario features two longtime partners, Ethan and Claire, sitting at their kitchen table late in the evening. The room is quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator. Claire has sensed for weeks that Ethan has been wrestling with something heavy, something he hasn't been ready to articulate. He still goes to work, still does his chores, still talks about daily things, but there's a subdued energy around him, a distance in his eyes that feels unfamiliar. Ethan finally breaks the silence. He begins with a line that instantly signals emotional depth. I've been doing a lot of thinking lately, and I need to talk to you about something that's been weighing on me. The phrase weighing on me is one native speakers often use to describe emotional pressure that builds internally. Claire sets down her cup and listens without interrupting. She already senses the seriousness behind his tone. She says softly, I'm here. What's been going on? Her response is open, calm, and inviting, a model of emotionally intelligent listening. Ethan takes a breath, trying to find the right words. I think I've reached a point where I can't ignore how disconnected I feel from my work. It's like I'm showing up physically, but mentally I'm somewhere else. I keep asking myself whether this career is actually aligned with who I am anymore. This idea of alignment, whether your external life matches your internal values, is a frequent theme in deep English conversations. It's how people express the sense of living in a way that contradicts their deeper purpose. He continues, I've been pushing through it because the job is stable. It pays the bills. It gives us security. But lately it feels like every day I stay, I'm drifting further from the person I want to be. Claire listens carefully. She doesn't rush to fill the silence or fix the issue immediately. She senses that Ethan needs space to fully articulate his thoughts before any discussion about solutions. This patience is crucial. Many advanced level English speakers demonstrate fluency, not through complexity, but through emotional pacing, knowing when to speak and when not to. Ethan then shares the moment that triggered everything. A few weeks ago, he helped his friend Lucas prepare for an art exhibit. He had spent an evening surrounded by paintings, sketches, and the raw energy of creative work, and something inside him shifted. He describes it as a kind of awakening, not dramatic, but undeniable. He says, it wasn't just a nice evening. It felt like a reminder of something I've been shutting out for years, something I used to care about deeply. Then he adds a phrase that carries weight. It hit me harder than I expected. This is how native speakers often describe emotional realizations that arrive suddenly and powerfully. Claire finally speaks. It sounds like this wasn't just a passing feeling. It sounds like something real. She's inviting him to go deeper without forcing him. Ethan nods. Exactly. I don't think it was just nostalgia. I think it was clarity. And now I'm questioning whether I can keep pretending I'm fine at my current job. I don't want to look back in 10 years and feel like I wasted my chance to live a life that feels meaningful. This is where the emotional stakes rise. He's not simply tired. He's confronting the fear of regret, one of the themes that drives the most profound human decisions. This fear is universal, and skilled speakers rely on specific phrasing to express it. Words like meaningful, purposeful, authentic, and fulfilling appear often in conversations about life direction. Claire lets the silence sit for a moment, absorbing what he said. Then she asks a grounding question. Are you thinking about leaving your job? Her tone is neutral, not panicked, not judgmental. She's clarifying, not assuming. Ethan hesitates. I don't know yet. Part of me wants to leave tomorrow, and another part of me is terrified of what that would mean for us, the financial risk, the uncertainty, the possibility that I might fail. I'm torn between wanting freedom and wanting stability. This kind of internal split is extremely common in English conversations, especially among adults dealing with responsibility. The phrase, I'm torn, is natural, relatable, and emotionally transparent. Claire reaches across the table and places her hand on his. Thank you for trusting me enough to say this out loud. Again, she validates before analyzing. Then she continues gently, I won't pretend I am not scared when I hear you talk about leaving a stable job, but I don't want you to stay somewhere that eats away at you. Here we see emotional complexity, fear mixed with empathy, concern mixed with support. This is advanced communication at its core. She adds, if we're going to talk about this seriously, we need to look at it from both angles, the emotional side and the practical side. This kind of balanced framing is common in healthy, mature relationships. Ethan nods slowly. That's exactly why I've been struggling. My heart is pulling me one way and logic is pulling me another. Claire thinks for a moment and then says something subtle but powerful. Maybe it is not about choosing one or the other immediately. Maybe it is about figuring out whether there is a responsible way to explore this without jumping off a cliff. This metaphor, jumping off a cliff, is extremely common when talking about big risks. But what Claire is suggesting here is a middle path, a softer approach, something between staying and leaving. She continues, what if you started by dipping your toes into the creative world again? Take a class, volunteer for a project, work with Lucas more often. See if this feeling grows or fades. Ethan looks relieved. That actually makes sense. I've been thinking in extremes. Stay forever or quit immediately. Maybe I need to slow down and test the waters. Their conversation shows how advanced speakers often use metaphors: drifting, awakening, alignment, jumping off a cliff, testing the waters to express internal states that don't easily fit into simple vocabulary. Claire smiles gently. We don't have to have all the answers tonight, but we can make a plan together. This final line reinforces collaboration, partnership, and shared responsibility, cornerstones of high-level interpersonal communication. Lessons on articulating internal conflict. The key lessons from this scenario: advanced fluency requires emotional accuracy. Phrases like, I'm torn, it's been weighing on me, or I feel disconnected, communicate real internal conflict. Metaphors make abstract feelings tangible. Native speakers frequently rely on visual language to express psychological states. Balanced communication creates safety. Acknowledging both feelings and practicality prevents conversations from becoming reactive. Clarity grows through dialogue. Speaking thoughts out loud helps organize them. Conversation becomes a tool for self-understanding. Scenario 5. Repairing trust after misinterpreted intentions. Next, we'll move to another reality: how people repair trust when intentions are misunderstood and how specific phrasing can turn tension into transparency. This new scenario takes place between two close friends, Ava and Marcus. Normally, their conversations flow effortlessly. They joke, they confide, they make plans. But recently, Ava has sensed a noticeable shift. Marcus has become withdrawn. Shorter replies, slower responses, less eye contact. And because she knows him well, she recognizes this isn't random moodiness, it's discomfort. One evening, after they meet for a quiet walk around their neighborhood, Ava gently opens the door to the conversation. She says, Hey, I've been picking up on a change in your energy lately. If something's on your mind, I'd really like to understand. This phrasing is intentional. She describes what she observes rather than assigning meaning to it. Change in your energy is soft but clear, avoiding loaded interpretations like you've been acting weird. Marcus exhales almost as if the question releases something he's been carrying. He hesitates, then says, I didn't want to make this awkward, but yeah, I've been feeling a little strange about something that happened last week. Ava's tone stays calm. Okay, I'm listening. He shifts his weight and finally explains, when we were at dinner with your coworkers, you made a joke about me always being late to everything. Everyone laughed. And I know you didn't mean anything by it, but I felt exposed. He pauses, searching for the right word, maybe even embarrassed. This is a real, relatable situation, minor on the surface, but carrying emotional depth. Ava's eyebrows lift slightly. She hadn't expected that. She remembers the moment clearly, but in her mind, it was harmless teasing. She responds carefully. Thank you for telling me. I truly didn't realize it landed that way. Notice again. Validation first, context second. Marcus continues. I know you weren't trying to put me on the spot, but the timing wasn't great. I was already nervous meeting new people, and I felt like the joke confirmed the worst impression I could make. He shakes his head lightly. It wasn't you. It was the moment, but it stayed with me. He uses a phrase native speakers lean on. It stayed with me, meaning it lingered emotionally long after the event. Ava absorbs this. She nods slowly and responds, I'm really sorry, Marcus. I honestly thought I was being playful, but I can completely see how it might have felt different from your perspective. She doesn't undercut his feeling with comments like, oh, come on, it wasn't that serious. That kind of reaction is common among less skilled communicators and often makes the situation worse. She continues, I didn't consider the context you were in. If I had known you were anxious, I would have never joked like that. Marcus takes a breath, a little relieved. I appreciate that. I didn't plan to bring it up because I didn't want to seem overly sensitive, but I realized it was affecting how I showed up around you. This is an important insight. When misunderstandings stay unspoken, they subtly alter behavior. Ava says, I'd rather you bring it up than carry it alone. And the last thing I want is for a careless moment on my part to make you pull away. Her phrasing is gentle but assertive, a balance that demonstrates mature fluency. Marcus nods. Thanks. I didn't want to assume your intention. I just misread the moment. Right here we see the introduction of an important advanced concept, distinguishing intention from impact. Ava seizes this opportunity to clarify with care. I'm glad you said that because my intention really was harmless, but I can fully acknowledge the impact it had. These kinds of statements are essential in repairing trust. They show ownership without defensiveness. To reinforce the bond, she follows up with, and please know, you never have to worry about seeming sensitive with me. If something affects you, I want to hear it. This line communicates safety, one of the most valuable components of meaningful communication. Marcus relaxes. That means a lot, and I'm glad we cleared it up. I didn't want something small to snowball. Ava smiles warmly. Same here, and I'll be more mindful in the future. Thank you for pointing it out. Advanced skills in repairing misunderstandings. This conversation feels simple on the surface, but it's packed with advanced communicative skills. Naming the issue without accusation. I sensed a change in your energy opens the door gently. Expressing feelings without blame. I felt exposed, not you embarrassed me. Validating before explaining. Ava acknowledges his experience before providing her perspective. Separating intention from impact. A key tool in emotionally intelligent communication. Reaffirming the relationship. Safety is explicitly strengthened through language. Scenario 6. Workplace feedback and emotional triggers. But now we move into an even more intricate layer of advanced communication. Navigating a scenario where both people believe they are right, yet their interpretations differ dramatically. These are conversations where clarity, objectivity, and self-regulation matter more than ever. The next scenario unfolds in a workplace, not about missed slides or deadlines this time, but about perceived criticism, emotional triggers, and the subtle difference between constructive feedback and personal attack. This is where real language mastery begins. This scenario centers on two co-workers, Lena and Robert, who collaborate often but have very different communication styles. Lena is straightforward and analytical. Robert is thoughtful, intuitive, and a bit more sensitive to tone than he admits. Their strengths normally complement each other until something shifts unexpectedly. It begins in a conference room after a team meeting earlier that morning. Lena had given Robert some feedback about his project proposal. She phrased it factually. "Some of your numbers might need verification before we present them." In her mind, this was neutral, even helpful. But Robert heard something very different. As soon as the meeting ended, he grew unusually quiet. He avoided eye contact. His responses to her became clipped, almost cold. Lena noticed the shift but didn't know what triggered it. Later that afternoon, sensing the growing tension, she approaches him at his desk and gently asks, "Hey, can we talk for a minute? I feel like something fell off this morning." Again, notice the balance. She acknowledges a shift without assuming why it happened. Robert looks hesitant, but agrees. They move to a quieter hallway and the conversation begins. Lena starts softly. "If I said something that landed wrong, I'd really like to understand." This phrase, "landed wrong," is common among native speakers when referring to unintended emotional impact. Robert sighs, gathering his thoughts. "Honestly, the comment you made about my numbers, it felt like a public criticism. It caught me off guard." Lena's eyebrows raised slightly. She genuinely didn't see her remark that way. "I'm really sorry it felt like that," she replies. "That wasn't my intention at all." But Robert isn't done. "I know you weren't trying to undermine me, but when you said that in front of everyone, I felt singled out." He pauses, searching for a phrase that captures the nuance. "It just hit a nerve." This phrase is extremely common. Hit a nerve describes a comment that unintentionally touches on a sensitive area, often because of stress or insecurity. Lena listens closely. She doesn't rush to defend herself. Instead, she says, "Thank you for telling me. I honestly thought I was being practical, but I can understand how the timing might have felt uncomfortable." This is the hallmark of advanced communication, acknowledging both perspectives without declaring one correct. Robert shifts his weight, softening slightly. "I've been anxious about that proposal. I've spent a lot of time on it, so I guess I was more sensitive than usual." Here, he does something crucial. He owns his internal reaction rather than projecting it onto Lena. This prevents the conversation from becoming accusatory. Lena nods. "That makes total sense, and I really value the work you've put into this. Maybe I should have checked in with you privately instead of saying it in the meeting." She then adds a phrase native speakers use to soften the emotional edge. "I am sorry for the way it came across." Again, focusing on the impact, not assigning blame. Robert exhales. Some tension leaves his shoulders. "I appreciate that. I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. I just needed to be honest about how it felt." This honesty creates a turning point in the conversation. Now that the emotional air is clear, they shift into practical territory. Lena says, "How about from now on, if either of us spots something that needs adjusting, we bring it up privately first. That way we're aligned before the team sees anything." Robert smiles slightly. "That would help a lot. And I'll try not to jump to conclusions about your tone. Sometimes I let my stress color things." This moment is key. He acknowledges the influence of his emotional state on interpretation, one of the most advanced forms of self-awareness and communication. Lena responds warmly. "It's normal. We all have days where things feel heavier than they are." Their conversation ends not only with the misunderstanding resolved, but with their professional relationship stronger than before. They didn't just fix the issue. They learned how to communicate better going forward. See 2 strategies for handling feedback. Several notable C-to-level strategies appear in this exchange. Naming emotional triggers calmly. It hit a nerve. I felt singled out. Both express emotion without blame. Clarifying intention without invalidating impact. I didn't mean it that way, but I understand how it came across. Repairing trust directly. I'm sorry for the way it landed. Co-creating future habits. Let's talk privately first next time. Recognizing internal bias. I let my stress color things. This kind of communication is not about fancy vocabulary. It's about clarity, honesty, and emotional maturity. Scenario 7. Storytelling for connection and insight. Now, we shift into another important component of advanced fluency, narrative construction. How native speakers tell stories, highlight key details, and build emotional arcs that make conversations richer, more engaging, and more meaningful. This next dialogue will showcase how storytelling becomes a tool for connection and how choosing the right phrases can transform a simple memory into a powerful shared insight. Our next scenario explores something deeply human, how people tell stories that reveal who they are, what they value, and how they interpret their past. Storytelling is one of the most powerful signs of advanced fluency, not because of complicated vocabulary, but because of structure, emotional pacing, and the ability to highlight meaning. This scene takes place between the siblings, Lucas and Emily, who rarely have long conversations because of their busy schedules. One weekend, they meet at a bakery they used to visit when they were kids. The familiar smell of warm bread and cinnamon rolls creates a comforting backdrop. And as they sit by the window, their conversation gradually drifts into memories. Emily begins with a simple, nostalgic line. It's funny how walking into this place brings everything back. Lucas smiles, nodding. Yeah, it's like the past is sitting at the table with us. This metaphor light, poetic, but natural is the kind of phrasing advanced speakers use without forcing it. Emily takes a sip of her coffee and says, "Do you remember that winter when Mom got sick and Dad had to work late every night?" Lucas nods immediately. Of course, everything felt heavier back then. Emily continues, "I've been thinking about that time a lot recently. Back then, I didn't realize how much pressure you were under." Lucas raises an eyebrow. "Me? I thought you were the one carrying everything." This small moment sets the stage for a deeper narrative. Emily explains, "I was overwhelmed, sure, but you were the one who always stepped in whenever something slipped through the cracks. You acted like it was no big deal, but I could tell you were stretched thin." She uses the phrase stretched thin, a common natural expression describing emotional or mental exhaustion. Lucas laughs softly. "I didn't think you noticed." "I did," Emily replies. "You always tried to hide it." She pauses before adding something she's never said out loud. "I think that was the moment I realized you weren't just my brother. You were someone I could rely on." Lucas is quiet, absorbing her words. He hadn't expected the conversation to take this turn. "Honestly," he says, "I didn't feel reliable. I felt like I was stumbling through everything. I didn't know what I was doing." Emily shakes her head gently. "But that's exactly what made it meaningful. You showed up anyway, even when you were scared or exhausted." This framing honoring effort over perfection is deeply rooted in how native speakers talk about emotional growth. Lucas sighs, almost relieved. "I guess I've always carried this feeling that I failed during that time, that I should have been stronger or calmer. I never thought of it the way you just described." His voice softens. "It is strange how two people can live through the same moment and walk away with completely different interpretations." "That's the thing about family memories," Emily replies. "They're shared, but also personal." This reflection opens the door to a deeper emotional truth. Emily adds, I've always wanted to tell you this, but I didn't know how. You weren't perfect, but you were present, and that meant everything. Lucas feels a lump in his throat. He admits, I've been carrying guilt about that winter for years. Hearing your version, it takes a weight off. Phrases like take a weight off are natural ways to describe emotional relief. Emily smiles softly. That's what conversations are for. Lucas leans back, suddenly reflective. You know, I think that winter shaped how I see responsibility. I felt like I had to grow up overnight. And ever since then, whenever something stressful happens, I go into this automatic mode where I try to fix everything myself. Emily nods knowingly. You still do that? Lucas chuckles. Yeah, it's not the healthiest habit, is it? She replies, it's not unhealthy, but it might be exhausting. Then she adds, you don't always have to be the one holding everything together. He considers this. I guess I've never learned how to ask for help without feeling like I'm burdening someone. Emily responds with one of the most emotionally intelligent lines native speakers use. Asking for help isn't a burden. It's an invitation. It tells people you trust them. This sentence shifts something inside Lucas. He sits quietly for a moment before admitting, I've never thought of it that way. Emily then shares her own reflection. That winter also shaped me. I learned how strong people can be when they're supported, even if the support is imperfect. Lucas smiles. You know, I always assumed you saw me as the one who was falling apart. It never crossed my mind that you saw me as strong. Emily leans forward. That's why we need conversations like this. They fill in the missing pieces. The moment softens further as Lucas says, I'm glad we're talking about this now. It feels overdue. Emily nods. Better late than never. Then Lucas adds a phrase that captures emotional reconciliation beautifully. It feels like something just clicked into place. Emily laughs. Same. Advanced storytelling and perspective exchange. This entire exchange demonstrates several advanced communication skills. Narrative depth through emotion, not complexity. Simple words reliable, overwhelmed, relieved carry powerful meaning. Perspective exchange. Understanding that two people can interpret the same event differently. Acknowledgement of vulnerability. Admitting fear, guilt, or exhaustion without dramatizing. Relational reassurance. You weren't perfect, but you were present is the kind of gentle truth that strengthens bonds. Using metaphor naturally. The past sitting at the table with us takes a weight off, something clicked into place. Each of these expressions adds texture without sounding exaggerated. Their conversation ends with something quiet but powerful. A shared understanding that the past didn't break them, it shaped them, and that their versions of those memories now fit together like two halves of one story. Final scenario. Complex decision-making with Daniel and Priya, but our deep dive isn't finished yet. Next, we shift to a more analytical exploration. How people articulate complex decisions while balancing logic, fear, and emotional stakes. This final long scenario brings together everything we've practiced: nuance, advanced vocabulary, emotional clarity, and real-life decision-making. Our final scenario brings us into the heart of complex decision-making, the kind that keeps people awake at night, where logic and emotion wrestle for control. These conversations show the highest level of English communication because they require precision, vulnerability, and the ability to articulate abstract thoughts without losing clarity. In this situation, two close friends, Daniel and Priya, meet at a quiet rooftop lounge after work. The city hums softly below them, lights flickering like a restless sea. Daniel has been unusually quiet all evening, his mind clearly elsewhere. Priya senses it and finally asks, You've been distant tonight. What's going on? Her tone is gentle but direct, exactly how native speakers address emotional withdrawal when trust is already established. Daniel exhales, rubbing his hands together. I've been carrying something for a while and I think I am finally ready to talk about it. Priya nods. I'm here. Take your time. These simple lines demonstrate emotional permission, an important aspect of deep communication. Daniel begins slowly. I'm thinking about leaving my job. Priya's eyebrows lift, not in shock, but in recognition of the weight of the statement. That's huge. What brought this on? He searches for the right words. It's not one moment. It's more like a pattern that's been building for months. Every day feels like I'm drifting further from the life I actually want. And the more I ignore it, the heavier it feels. Priya listens closely. Words like drifting and heavier tell her this isn't just dissatisfaction, it's identity-level discomfort. Daniel continues, I've spent the last 10 years climbing this ladder because I thought it was the smart thing to do. Stable income, clear path, impressive title. But lately, it all feels hollow. The word hollow carries emotional depth. It's frequently used by native speakers to describe success that looks good externally but feels empty internally. Priya nods slowly. When did you start feeling this way? Daniel laughs without humor. I think I ignored the signs for years, but the tipping point happened last month. I was mentoring a junior designer, and watching him talk about his side projects, I felt this sudden jolt like I was looking at a version of myself I abandoned along the way. He pauses, trying to articulate something slippery. It wasn't envy. It was recognition, like I was staring at the passion I used to have. Priya leans in. That must have been intense. Daniel nods. It was, and it forced me to admit something I've been avoiding. I don't want to build someone else's dream anymore. I want to build my own. This line marks a turning point. It reveals ambition, frustration, and longing all at once. Priya takes a breath. So, what's stopping you? Daniel answers immediately. Fear. He lets the word sit in the air. Fear of instability. Fear of disappointing people. Fear of making the wrong choice and realizing I threw away the security I worked so hard for. He shakes his head. I keep imagining every worst-case scenario. Priya's voice softens. That's understandable. Fear is part of any major transition. Daniel adds, but it's not just fear. It's responsibility. I've built my entire life around being dependable, predictable, reliable. Walking away from that feels irresponsible. Here he uses a technique common in advanced emotional conversations, naming the competing values. Security versus authenticity, stability versus fulfillment, external expectations versus internal truth. Priya takes a thoughtful pause before responding. Can I be honest? Daniel nods. You sound like someone who's already made the decision emotionally, but hasn't given himself permission to say it out loud logically. Daniel freezes. Her words strike something deep. He murmurs, maybe. Priya continues gently. You're not reckless. You're not impulsive. If you're feeling this strongly, it's not a whim. It's a signal. Daniel lifts his eyes. But what if the signal is wrong? Priya replies with a phrase native speakers use when confronting uncertainty. No path guarantees anything, but ignoring the truth you already feel. That's the one choice that guarantees regret. Daniel leans back, absorbing that. So what do I do? Quit tomorrow? Take a leap of faith? Priya smiles slightly. I'm not saying jump off a cliff. I'm saying build a bridge first. This metaphor echoes earlier scenarios. It's practical, grounded, and emotionally reassuring. She elaborates. Before you make any radical move, explore, test the ground, start small, take on freelance work, revive your creative projects, build confidence in the new direction before you fully commit. Daniel sighs in relief. That actually feels doable. Priya nods. It's not about choosing instantly. It's about gathering enough clarity that the next step feels intentional, not rushed. Daniel looks out over the skyline. I just want my life to feel meaningful again. I'm tired of living in survival mode. Priya responds softly. Meaning comes from alignment, not avoidance. And you're finally listening to yourself. He smiles weakly, but it's the smile of someone who has just felt a weight shift slightly but noticeably. Daniel quietly admits, I didn't realize how much I needed to say this out loud. Priya places a hand on his shoulder. That's what friends are for. Then she adds one more line, simple, grounding, profoundly native. You don't have to figure out everything tonight. You just have to stop pretending you're fine. This sentence lands with clarity, not dramatic, just true. Daniel nods, feeling lighter. Thank you, really. Tools for articulating complex decisions. This conversation reveals several advanced communication tools, naming emotions with nuance, hollow, drifting, heavier, recognition, responsibility, using metaphors to clarify inner conflict, climbing a ladder, looking at a version of myself, build a bridge, allowing silence to carry meaning. Emotion needs space, balancing empathy with gentle challenge. You sound like you've already made the decision emotionally, moving from emotion to strategy, not reckless leaps, but intentional exploration. Conclusion. The core principles of advanced fluency. We now move toward the conclusion of this deep dive, a final section that ties together everything: emotional intelligence, narrative structure, intentional phrasing, advanced vocabulary, and the delicate skill of guiding conversations toward clarity. As the evening deepens and the city lights shimmer across the rooftops, Daniel and Priya sit in a long, quiet moment. Not an awkward silence, but a thoughtful one, the kind that often follows emotional clarity. You can almost feel the air settle between them, the weight of unspoken tension finally easing. Priya eventually breaks the silence with a gentle, reflective tone. You know, she says, the hardest part of any turning point isn't the decision itself. It's admitting to yourself that the life you've built no longer fits who you are becoming. Daniel nods slowly. Yeah, I think I've been scared to admit that the version of success I've been chasing wasn't actually mine. This single line encapsulates something millions of English speakers struggle to articulate: the dissonance between external success and internal fulfillment. The ability to express this tension clearly is a hallmark of advanced fluency. Priya continues, the good news is you're not starting from zero. You're starting from experience, from insight, from a decade of skills that you'll carry with you no matter what direction you take. Daniel allows a small smile to form. That's true. I keep thinking of this as losing something, but maybe it's just shifting. That's exactly it, Priya replies. Change isn't subtraction, it's evolution. She leans forward, her voice steady. You know what? I think you're finally listening to the part of yourself you've ignored for too long. And that isn't reckless. That's honest. His eyes soften at that. I guess I needed someone to reflect it back to me. Priya responds simply. Sometimes clarity comes from hearing your own truth spoken out loud. They sit with that thought, letting it sink in. Then Priya adds a line that feels both grounding and liberating. You don't need a perfect plan. You just need an honest one. Daniel laughs quietly, a sound filled with release. Yeah, that feels right. He looks out over the skyline again, but this time with less heaviness. I think I'm ready to start building that bridge. Slowly, thoughtfully, one piece at a time. Priya smiles warmly, and I'll be here cheering you on. Their conversation ends not with a dramatic breakthrough, but with something far more realistic and powerful: a quiet internal shift, a sense of direction, and the relief that comes from honesty, connection, and clarity. And as we wrap up this deep dive into advanced English communication, These last scenes tie together everything we've explored so far. Throughout these scenarios, Natalie and Chris processing stress and serendipity, Mia and Jordan navigating vulnerability and hidden discomfort, Lena and Robert resolving workplace misinterpretation, Lucas and Emily reflecting on shared memories and emotional meaning, Daniel and Priya confronting identity, purpose, fear, and change. We've seen the real foundations of C to fluency, not complicated grammar, not obscure vocabulary, not academic analysis, but precision, empathy, pacing, emotional insight, and intentional phrasing. The core principles that emerged here are the core principles that emerged across the conversations. State observations, not accusations. I sensed a shift instead of "you're acting differently." Name your emotions clearly. I felt overwhelmed. It hit a nerve. I was torn. It felt hollow. Validate before responding. I can see why that would bother you. Separate intention from impact. I didn't mean it that way, but I understand how it landed. Use metaphors to express complexity. Building a bridge, drifting, carrying weight, awakening. Let silence be a tool, not a threat. It allows space for honesty. Reflective listening deepens connection. So what you're saying is, it sounds like, that must have felt. Collaboration solves tension. How can we prevent this in the future? What would help you feel supported? Honesty builds trust. Carefully delivered, honesty sustains it. Clarity isn't rushed. It's constructed one moment after another, one phrase at a time. If you pay attention to how native speakers navigate their most meaningful conversations, you'll notice these same patterns repeated again and again, not because they follow rules, but because these strategies reflect how humans naturally build understanding. This is the heart of real advanced fluency, using language not just to communicate, but to connect, not just to describe events, but to reveal meaning, not just to exchange words, but to move relationships forward. Before we close, here's one final question for your own growth, something to carry into your week. Is there a conversation in your life, or being just a little more honest, a little more clear, or a little more emotionally present could shift something important? Maybe it's a small misunderstanding you've been avoiding. Maybe it's a boundary you haven't expressed yet. Maybe it's a truth you haven't allowed yourself to say out loud. Consider how the tools we practice, validation, clarity, emotional vocabulary, narrative insight, might help you approach that moment with confidence. Every conversation is a chance to refine your fluency. Every expression of truth is a step toward authenticity, and every small shift in communication builds the foundation for deeper relationships. Thank you for joining this deep dive on English in Motion. We'll see you in the next session as we keep exploring the real, human, beautifully complex ways we use language to understand ourselves and each other.